The day had started like any other for the young woman. The sun shone through her window, casting light across her small bedroom, where a piano sat in the corner like a silent companion. She ran her fingers across the keys, feeling the familiar weight and texture beneath them. Her hands trembled slightly, not from fear of the music itself, but from what awaited her outside the safety of her room. Today was the day of the local music competition, and though she had prepared for months, the thought of performing in front of a crowded hall made her stomach twist into knots. She had always loved the piano. It had been a source of comfort, a way to express feelings she could not put into words. Her parents had noticed her talent early on, and they had encouraged her,
Telling her in lessons,
and praising her dedication. But outside of her family and a few close friends, very few had shown her support. The world had not been kind to her ambitions. She had endured whispers and laughter from classmates who didn't understand her passion. She had overheard cruel comments, voices mocking her every effort. She had been told countless times that she would never amount to anything with her music, that her dreams were childish and impractical. Those words had hurt, but they had also sparked something inside her. Each insult became a challenge, each dismissive comment a reason to try harder. She had spent late nights practicing, refining her skills, pouring her heart into melodies that nobody seemed to notice. Her fingers had memorized every key, every chord, yet the outside world remained skeptical. Still, she pressed on. She loved the piano too much to stop, and she clung to the belief that one day she would prove everyone wrong. The morning of the competition, she dressed carefully, choosing a simple outfit that would not distract from her music, but would make her feel confident. Her reflection in the mirror showed a young woman with a nervous smile and eyes that held both fear and determination. She took a deep breath, trying to calm the rapid beating of her heart. She reminded herself of all the hours she had spent preparing, of the countless times she had imagined this very moment. She could do this. She had to do this. Arriving at the hall, she was immediately struck by the bustling energy of the crowd. Parents, friends, and strangers milled about, chatting and laughing. Other competitors were tuning their instruments, running scales, and practicing pieces with visible confidence. She tried to blend into the background, carrying her sheet music and adjusting her notes one last time. She could feel the tension building, not just within herself, but in the room around her. The air was thick with anticipation and silent judgment. As she walked toward the stage area, she began to hear the first hints of mockery. A few students from her school, who had come to watch the competition, started whispering to one another. Their voices were low but sharp enough to carry. "I don't think she's even ready," one said. "She's going to make a fool of herself," another laughed. A sound meant to sting, meant to make her second-guess her own abilities. She clenched her hands around her sheet music, trying not to let their words reach her, trying to focus on the music she knew so well. But it was impossible not to feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. She found her seat at the piano, a grand instrument that gleamed under the stage lights. The audience was already settling, and the murmurs of doubt and casual conversation reached her ears. She felt the familiar panic rising, the same panic she had felt countless times before auditions and performances. But this time, it was stronger because the room was larger, the audience more critical, and the stakes felt higher. She took another deep breath, letting her fingers hover over the keys. She tried to remind herself why she played the piano in the first place. It wasn't for them. It wasn't for the whispers or the laughter. It was for her. It was for the music itself. The competition was called to order, and one by one performers took their place at the piano or in front of the audience. Some were young, some older, but all seemed confident, polished, and ready. She watched as their performances unfolded, feeling a mixture of admiration and anxiety. She wanted to tell herself that she was ready, that she was prepared, but the words of her mockers still echoed in her mind. She tried to push them aside, focusing on the melodies that she had practiced until her fingers ached, the songs that had become part of her soul. As her turn approached, the whispers grew louder. She could hear a few audience members murmuring about her, questioning why she was even there. "Are you sure she's ready? I've never heard her play well." She wanted to shrink into herself, to disappear under the stage. The urge to run was almost overwhelming. But she remembered the nights spent practicing alone, the mornings when her fingers were sore but her heart was full. She remembered the moments when the piano had been her only friend, her only outlet. That memory gave her strength. She would not let them take that away from her. When her name was called, she walked onto the stage with a mixture of fear and determination. The hall seemed to grow quieter as all eyes turned toward her. The whispers of mockery still lingered at the edges, but they were now accompanied by curious glances from others who were eager to see her performance. She sat down at the piano, adjusted the bench, and took a deep breath. Her hands rested on the keys, and for a moment she simply looked at the instrument. It was familiar, comforting, and welcoming. The first note rang out, trembling slightly under her nervous fingers. She paused for a moment, listening, feeling, and then continued. Slowly she began to settle into the music, letting it guide her hands and her mind. The melody started softly, delicate and hesitant, like a voice finding its courage. She felt herself sinking into the music, feeling each note, each pause, each rise and fall. The hall seemed to fade away, and for a few precious minutes, there was only her and the piano. But the mockery had not disappeared completely. A few voices still whispered, attempting to undermine her confidence. She can't even keep time. I told you this would be a disaster. She felt a pang of doubt, but she did not stop. She had come too far, worked too hard, to let a few cruel words shatter her focus. Instead, she allowed the music to speak for her, to tell her story in a language that required no explanation. As the piece continued, she felt a shift within herself. The nervous tremors in her hands began to ease, replaced by a growing sense of control and power. She realized that she could not let the opinions of others dictate her performance. The music was hers, and she would give it everything she had. With each note, she poured more of herself into the melody, letting her emotions flow freely, trusting that her dedication would shine through. For those in the audience who had doubted her, this was the beginning of surprise. The tentative, hesitant first notes had blossomed into something more, something that held depth and meaning. There were still whispers, still a few sneers, but the music began to capture the attention of more people than she had imagined. She noticed some faces turning toward her, expressions of curiosity replacing judgment. Some leaned forward as if trying to understand the story her hands were telling. She continued to play, each measure building upon the last. The hall was now filled with a mixture of sounds, the richness of the piano, the quiet hum of anticipation, and the slowly fading whispers of doubt. She felt herself becoming more confident, more connected to the instrument. Every mistake she had feared making seemed to vanish as her focus sharpened, as if the piano itself was guiding her hands, though her performance was still in its early stages. She could feel a subtle change in the energy around her. The mockery that had weighed on her so heavily was beginning to lose its power. Her music was reaching people, touching them in ways words could not. She allowed herself a small smile, flicker of hope that perhaps this moment could be more than she had ever imagined. The first part of her performance came to a gentle pause, a perfect moment of silence that hung in the air. She lifted her hands from the keys, feeling the vibrations linger under her fingertips. For a brief instant, the audience held its breath, caught in the spell of the music. And in that moment, she felt something she had rarely experienced, a sense of triumph, not over the audience, but over her own fears. She had taken the first step in turning Mockery into a masterpiece, and it was only the beginning. After finishing her first tentative notes, she felt a strange mix of relief and anticipation. The music had begun to flow, and with it, a feeling of calm settled over her. She had survived the first few moments that had seemed impossible just an hour ago. Yet, she knew the true challenge was not just to start, but to continue. To transform the whispers and skepticism into something unforgettable. The room seemed alive now, the air thick with expectation, as she prepared herself for the next part of her performance. She closed her eyes briefly, letting her mind wander to the countless hours she had spent practicing. She remembered early mornings when the sun had barely risen, and she was already at the piano, her fingers stiff but determined. She remembered the evenings when her parents had left her alone in the quiet house, giving her the freedom to practice without interruptions. Every mistake, Every frustration had shaped her, had taught her patience and persistence. She understood that the piano was not just an instrument. It was a reflection of her soul, and every note carried a piece of her journey. The audience sat in silence, the murmurs having faded as they were drawn into her world. Some had come expecting a simple performance, a young musician who might struggle under pressure. Instead, they found a woman who moved with a quiet confidence, who let the music tell a story far beyond words. She was not playing to impress them. She was playing to express herself, to share something deeply personal, something that could only be understood through the language of sound. Her fingers glided over the keys, each note deliberate and filled with emotion. She allowed herself to feel everything she had felt in the past months, the frustration of ridicule, the joy of small victories, the pain of doubt. Each feeling became part of the music, each chord a reflection of her journey. She noticed that the initial tension in her shoulders had eased, replaced by a sense of control. The piano seemed to respond to her touch, as if it had been waiting for this moment, ready to amplify the story she wanted to tell. As the melody developed, she began to explore the dynamics of the piece more boldly. The soft, gentle notes gave way to more powerful passages, each one carrying more confidence than the last. She allowed herself to move with the music, leaning into the piano, letting her body and spirit become one with the instrument. The audience could sense this connection. Their eyes followed her every movement, their attention fully captured. She realized that for the first time in a long while, she was not just performing, she was communicating. She thought about the mockers in the crowd, those who had doubted her from the start. She did not play to prove them wrong, though she knew their disbelief would soon be challenged. She played because the piano had always been her refuge, her way to make sense of the world. And yet she could not help but notice how the atmosphere had shifted. The skeptical glances had softened, replaced with curiosity. Some were leaning forward, listening more intently. Even a few, who had been laughing quietly earlier, now sat still, eyes fixed on her hands and the melody that flowed from them. She felt a surge of determination. This was her moment, a chance to take everything she had learned, every note she had practiced, and transform it into something more than a simple performance. She wanted the audience to feel the music, to experience the emotion she had poured into it. She wanted them to understand, even briefly, what it meant to dedicate herself so fully to her passion. She could sense that the story of her struggle and perseverance was beginning to resonate, carried not by words but by the vibrations of the piano. The middle section of her piece required both technical skill and emotional depth. She focused on every detail, every subtle change in tempo, every dynamic shift. Her fingers moved with precision, yet they also expressed a freedom that came from years of practice and a deep connection to the music. The notes were no longer just sounds. They were a reflection of her courage, her resilience, and her unwavering belief in herself. She felt a sense of empowerment she had never known before, as if each note was a small victory over doubt and fear. She noticed the reactions in the audience. Some had their eyes closed, swaying gently with the music, lost in the emotion she had awakened. Others had taken a step back, realizing that what they were witnessing was not just a performance, but a glimpse into the soul of someone who had worked tirelessly to master her craft. She could see the admiration growing in their expressions, a silent acknowledgement that she was more than the doubts they had held. For the first time, the mockery that had seemed so loud earlier felt distant, insignificant, as she continued. She allowed herself to fully embrace the vulnerability of performing. She knew that true artistry came from honesty, from revealing a piece of oneself without fear of judgment. She let her heart guide her fingers, allowing the melody to ebb and flow naturally, to breathe and speak. The piano responded, each key a conversation, each chord a declaration. She felt the music reaching its peak, the crescendo of emotion that would leave a lasting impression on everyone in the hall. She remembered why she had started this journey, why she had chosen to dedicate herself to music despite the challenges. It was never about fame or recognition. It was about connection, about sharing something meaningful with the world. And now, standing on that stage, she realized that connection was happening. The audience was no longer a faceless crowd. They were witnesses to her story, participants in her journey. She felt a sense of unity, a bond created through the language of music. Even as she played, she thought of the lessons she had learned along the way. She had learned patience, perseverance, and the importance of self-belief. She had learned that failure and ridicule were not the end, but opportunities to grow stronger. She had learned that true success was not measured by applause or recognition, but by the courage to continue, to create, and to share what she loved with others. These lessons were now embodied in her performance, each note a testament to her journey. The melody began to take on a more reflective tone, a softer, more introspective section that allowed her to express vulnerability. She thought about the moments of doubt, the nights spent questioning her path, times she had felt unseen and unappreciated. She poured those memories into the music, transforming them into something beautiful. The audience felt it too, responding to the honesty and depth of her expression. There was a silence in the hall that spoke louder than words, a collective recognition of the emotional journey unfolding before them. She noticed the subtle changes in the room. People were leaning forward, their eyes attentive, their faces showing a mix of surprise, admiration, and even awe. The energy that had been skeptical moments before was now filled with anticipation. She could feel the room holding its breath, waiting for the next phrase, the next emotion to unfold. She smiled inwardly, realizing that she had begun to capture their hearts, not through performance alone, but through the authenticity and passion that had always driven her. As she moved into the final section of her piece, she felt a renewed sense of confidence. The nervousness that had gripped her at the start had transformed into focus and clarity. She knew every note, every pause, every nuance of the music. She allowed herself to play with intention, to express the full range of her emotions. The music soared, powerful and compelling, carrying with it the story of struggle, determination, and triumph. She felt a sense of liberation, as if the piano itself was celebrating her courage and persistence. The hall responded to her performance in subtle but unmistakable ways. The audience was fully engaged, some leaning closer to hear the intricate details, others closing their eyes to immerse themselves in the emotion. Even the skeptics who had whispered doubts at the start were now silent, caught in the spell of the music. She did not play for their approval, but she felt a quiet satisfaction in knowing that her dedication was finally being recognized, even if only for a moment. As the final notes approached, she allowed herself to reflect on the journey that had brought her here. Every hour of practice, every moment of doubt, every harsh word and sneer had contributed to this moment of connection. She realized that the path had not been easy, but it had been worth it. The music she played was a reflection of her life, a narrative of resilience, passion, and the refusal to give up. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the challenges that had shaped her, for the piano that had been her companion, and for the audience that was now witnessing her truth. With the last note lingering in the air, she let her hands rest gently on the keys, feeling the vibrations beneath her fingers. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the weight of the emotion she had shared. The audience, too, seemed to sense the significance of the moment, holding their breath in reverence. She sat there for a few moments, letting the experience settle, letting the music speak in the quiet after the final note. Part 2 of her journey had been one of discovery and transformation. She had moved from nervous anticipation to confident expression, from vulnerability to empowerment. She had learned that the true power of music lay not in perfection, but in honesty, passion, and the ability to convey emotion. She had begun to understand that the mockery and doubt she had faced were not barriers, but stepping stones, opportunities to prove to herself what she was capable of achieving. As she rose from the piano bench and prepared for the next phase of her performance, she felt a sense of purpose and clarity she had never known before. The journey was far from over, but she had taken a significant step forward. She had transformed fear into courage, doubt into determination, and mockery into a source of strength. She knew that the story was only beginning, that the true impact of her performance would continue to unfold with every note, every gesture, and every connection made with the audience. And with that realization, she readied herself to continue. Confident that her music could truly silence the doubt, she had reached a point in her performance where the music was no longer just a series of notes and rhythms. It had become an extension of herself, a language that conveyed emotions words could not capture. Every movement of her hands, every press of a key, was deliberate, thoughtful, and filled with meaning. She was no longer thinking about the audience, the whispers, or the judgment she had feared. All that mattered was the music, the connection it created, and the story it told. She felt a sense of freedom she had never known, as if the piano had become a bridge between her inner world and the hearts of those listening. As the melody unfolded, the initial skepticism in the room began to dissipate. Faces that had once worn expressions of doubt now showed curiosity and wonder. Some audience members leaned forward, captivated by the emotions streaming from the piano. Others closed their eyes, letting the music envelop them, guiding them through a journey they could not see, but could deeply feel. Even the students who had whispered cruel remarks at the start now watched in silence, unable to look away. The music had taken control, transforming their perception in ways they had not anticipated. Her hands moved with precision, but also with a fluidity that spoke of years of practice and dedication. Every chord, every scale, every delicate touch of the keys was a testament to her determination. She felt herself losing track of time, immersed in the flow of the piece. The initial tension that had gripped her at the start of the performance had melted away, replaced by a growing confidence and mastery. She could feel the story she wanted to tell taking shape, a narrative of struggle, perseverance, and triumph. The audience was no longer a distant presence. They had become part of the experience. She could sense their engagement, their emotions rising and falling with the tempo of the music. The hall seemed to vibrate with the resonance of her performance, each note lingering in the air, echoing long after it was played. She felt a profound connection to the people around her, shared understanding that transcended language and cultural differences. Music had always been her refuge, but now it had become a bridge, bringing her and the audience together in a way that was both intimate and powerful. As the performance progressed, she began to experiment with dynamics and expression. Soft passages became gentle whispers, conveying vulnerability and introspection. Bold, powerful chords erupted like declarations, expressing courage and determination. She allowed herself to be vulnerable, to let the music reflect not just her skill, but her emotions and experiences. This vulnerability, she realized, was the key to touching the hearts of those listening. It was not perfection that moved people, but honesty and authenticity. She remembered the countless hours she had spent alone at the piano, practicing scales, perfecting technique, and learning to control every nuance of her playing. Those hours had been filled with frustration and doubt, but also with a quiet sense of purpose. Every mistake, every struggle had been a lesson, shaping her into the musician she had become. She thought about the nights when she had felt unseen, unheard, and unappreciated, and how those feelings had fueled her determination. Now, on this stage, she could transform all those experiences into something beautiful, something that resonated with others. The melody she played was intricate and demanding, requiring both technical skill and emotional depth. She felt a sense of exhilaration as her fingers navigated the keys, each movement precise yet expressive. The music had become a conversation, a dialogue between her and the piano, and between her and the audience. She could feel the impact of each phrase. The way it drew listeners in, made them pause, reflect, and feel. The initial whispers of mockery had long disappeared, replaced by a deep appreciation for the artistry unfolding before them. She began to notice subtle reactions in the audience. Some were leaning closer, captivated by the details and nuances of her performance. Others had tears in their eyes, moved by the emotions conveyed through the music. A few were sitting in quiet astonishment, their expressions a mix of surprise and admiration. She felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her dedication and perseverance were being recognized, even if silently. The music had spoken for her, and it was being heard, understood, and felt. Her confidence continued to grow as she moved into the more challenging sections of the piece. The faster passages demanded agility and focus, and she welcomed the challenge. Her hands danced across the keys with skill and precision, each note clear, crisp, and full of intent. She allowed herself to be carried by the momentum of the music, to let the rhythm and melody guide her. The audience could sense the intensity and passion behind every note, and they responded with rapt attention, fully engaged in the performance. In these moments, she reflected on the journey that had brought her here. She had faced ridicule, doubt, and countless obstacles, yet she had persevered. Every tear, every frustration, every moment of self-doubt had led her to this stage, to this performance, to this opportunity to share her heart and soul with others. She realized that the struggles she had endured were not burdens but stepping stones, shaping her into the person and musician she had become. The music she played was a testament to her resilience and determination as she transitioned into the final part of the piece. She allowed herself to fully embrace the emotional depth of the music. She played with a sense of liberation, each note infused with passion, each chord resonating with meaning. The audience was completely absorbed, their earlier skepticism replaced with admiration and wonder. She could feel the energy in the room shifting, the collective breath of the listeners rising and falling with the music. It was a powerful, almost magical experience, one that connected her to every person present in a profound way. She remembered the moments of doubt that had plagued her in the past, the fear that she might fail or be ridiculed. Those fears now seemed distant, irrelevant compared to the power of the music she was creating. She had learned that true artistry was not about avoiding mistakes or seeking approval, but about expressing oneself fully and honestly. She had discovered that vulnerability could be a source of strength. Sharing one's emotions through music could touch others in ways words never could. The audience had become witnesses to her journey, participants in the story she was telling through the piano. The hall was silent except for the music, every ear attuned to the unfolding performance. She felt a deep sense of connection with the listeners, a shared understanding that transcended spoken language. The notes she played carried her experiences, her triumphs, her struggles, and her emotions. The music had become a bridge, linking her heart to theirs, creating a moment of unity and shared humanity. She realized that this was the true power of music, its ability to communicate what words could not, to reach people on a deeply emotional level. As the piece neared its conclusion, she felt a mixture of exhilaration and serenity. She had navigated the challenges, expressed her emotions, and connected with the audience in a way she had never imagined possible. Her fingers moved with confidence and grace, each note deliberate and expressive. The music swelled, building to a climax that showcased both technical skill and emotional depth. She felt a sense of triumph, not over the audience, but over her own doubts and fears. She had transformed the initial Mockery into a performance that commanded respect and admiration. The final notes rang out, lingering in the air like a soft echo of the emotions she had conveyed. She let her hands rest on the keys, feeling the vibrations beneath her fingertips, and took a deep breath. The audience remained silent for a moment, absorbed in the impact of the music. Then, slowly, applause began to ripple through the hall, growing in intensity until it became a resounding ovation. She looked up and saw the expressions on the faces of those who had once doubted her, now filled with awe and respect. The transformation was complete, Mockery silenced by the power of her performance. She rose from the piano bench, a sense of fulfillment and joy washing over her. The journey she had undertaken, the obstacles she had overcome, and the dedication she had shown had culminated in this moment of recognition and appreciation. She felt a deep gratitude for the piano, for the music, and for the opportunity to share her story. The experience had not only proven her abilities to others, but it also affirmed her own belief in herself and her passion. As she stepped away from the piano, she understood that the performance was more than a display of skill. It was a reflection of her journey, her resilience, and her unwavering commitment to her art. She had taken the first steps in transforming Mockery into mastery. Using music as her voice and her expression, the audience had been captivated, moved, and inspired, and she had found a sense of empowerment that would stay with her long after the final note had faded. As she continued playing, the young woman could feel a profound change in the atmosphere of the hall. The audience, once skeptical and whispering in doubt, had been completely captivated. The music she poured from her soul was no longer just notes. It had become a story, a message that resonated deeply with everyone present. Each chord, each melody, each delicate touch of the keys was a testament to the journey she had taken, the struggles, the endless practice, the moments of self-doubt, and the determination that had carried her this far. She felt a rush of confidence as she allowed herself to fully inhabit the music. She no longer played merely to perform. She played to connect, to communicate with every person in the room. Her fingers moved swiftly, yet gracefully, weaving intricate patterns across the keys, creating harmonies that were both powerful and tender. The music seemed to have a life of its own, guiding her, inspiring her, and speaking to the audience in ways that words never could. For the first time in a long while, she felt truly seen, not just by a few close family members or friends, but by an entire hall of people who were experiencing her art in real time. The skepticism that had once weighed heavily on her heart now felt like a distant memory, replaced by the thrill of sharing something meaningful. She realized that this was the moment she had been preparing for, the culmination of countless hours of effort, perseverance, and belief in herself. She glanced briefly at the audience and noticed subtle changes. People were leaning forward, eyes wide with astonishment, faces softened with admiration. Some were nodding slowly, as if understanding the story behind the music without a single word being spoken. Others had tears in their eyes, touched by the emotions she had embedded in every phrase. The mockery and doubt that had shadowed her steps were completely silenced, replaced by awe and respect. This was a transformation that went far beyond her own expectations. Her hands moved with increasing confidence, dancing across the keys with precision and passion. The middle section of the piece demanded both technical skill and emotional depth, and she embraced the challenge with ease. The faster passages were executed with clarity, each note resonating clearly in the hall, while the slower, softer sections carried a tenderness that made the audience pause and reflect. The music had a rhythm and flow that mirrored her own heartbeat, a rhythm that made the hall itself seem to vibrate with her energy. She remembered the early days, when playing even a simple piece had been a struggle. She recalled the long nights spent practicing alone, fingers sore and eyes tired, yet refusing to give up. She thought about the ridicule and dismissive comments she had endured, the people who told her she would never succeed, and the moments when doubt had threatened to overwhelm her. Each memory, instead of weakening her, now fueled the performance, giving it a depth and authenticity that could not be learned from books or lessons alone. The audience could feel it, even if they did not know the story behind it. The young woman allowed herself to become fully immersed in the music, letting the emotions guide her every movement. She did not play for recognition or applause. She played because the piano was an extension of her soul, a voice that had waited patiently for its moment. Each chord told a story. Each note revealed a piece of her heart. The music rose and fell like a living thing, carrying with it the triumphs and struggles that had defined her journey. The audience responded intuitively, drawn in by the honesty and vulnerability of her performance. As she moved through the piece, the crescendo approached, a powerful surge of sound and emotion. She felt the intensity building within her, a combination of excitement, determination, and pure joy. Her hands flew over the keys, confident and precise, each note hitting with clarity and purpose. The hall seemed to hold its breath, the audience fully engaged in the story she was telling. Even those who had doubted her at the beginning were now captivated, unable to look away or ignore the brilliance of her performance. She could sense the energy shifting in the room. The whispers of mockery and skepticism that had lingered at the edges of her awareness were gone, replaced by a collective admiration that was palpable. The audience's engagement was not just passive, it was active, a silent dialogue between her and each person watching. She felt the power of music as a universal language, capable of transcending barriers, silencing doubt and inspiring connection. The realization filled her with a sense of purpose and fulfillment she had never experienced before. The young woman allowed herself to embrace vulnerability, knowing that it was the key to a truly moving performance. She played with every ounce of emotion she could summon, allowing joy, sorrow, hope, and determination to flow through her hands and into the keys. She felt a profound connection to the instrument, as if the piano were an extension of her own body and spirit. The music became more than sound. It became a living expression of her journey, her resilience, and her passion. She noticed the audience responding in subtle ways. Some were leaning forward, captivated by the intricacies of her technique. Others had their eyes closed, lost in the emotions of the piece. A few were wiping away tears, moved by the raw honesty and depth of her performance. The energy in the room was electric, a shared experience that transcended spoken words. The young woman felt a quiet satisfaction knowing that her dedication and perseverance had created a moment of genuine connection as she approached the final section of the piece. She felt a sense of exhilaration and serenity. She had navigated the technical challenges, expressed her emotions fully, and captured the hearts of those listening. The crescendo was powerful, yet controlled, a culmination of all the energy and emotion she had poured into the performance. Her hands moved with precision and grace, each note deliberate and expressive. The music soared, filling the hall with a resonance that seemed to echo the very essence of her journey. She reflected on the obstacles she had overcome to reach this moment. Every insult, every moment of self-doubt, every hour spent practicing alone had been a step toward this stage. She realized that the journey itself had been as important as the performance, shaping her into the musician and person she had become. The music she played was a testament to her resilience, determination, and unwavering belief in herself. It was a story of triumph over doubt, a narrative of transformation that the audience could feel deeply. The young woman felt a sense of liberation as she continued playing. The hall was filled with the rich, full sound of the piano, each note resonating with clarity and emotion. She allowed herself to be fully present, to experience the music without fear or hesitation. The audience was completely absorbed, their attention unwavering, their emotions engaged. Even those who had doubted her from the beginning were now silent, captivated by the power and beauty of her performance. The transformation from mockery to admiration was complete. As the final notes approached, she played with a mixture of confidence and vulnerability, allowing the music to carry the story to its conclusion. The room seemed to vibrate with the energy of the performance, the audience caught in a shared moment of awe and appreciation. She felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had not only demonstrated her skill, but had also communicated something profound and meaningful. The applause, when it came, was thunderous and heartfelt, a reflection of the journey she had taken and the emotions she had shared. She rose from the piano bench, her heart full and her spirit uplifted. The young woman knew that this performance was more than a display of technical ability. It was a manifestation of her journey, her resilience, and her passion. She had transformed the mockery and doubt she had faced into a masterpiece, using music as her voice and her expression. The audience had been captivated, moved, and inspired, and she had found a sense of empowerment that would stay with her long after the final note had faded. This was the moment she had worked for, dreamed of, and persevered toward, and it had arrived in all its brilliance. The final part of her performance had begun, and the young woman felt a mixture of calm and exhilaration. The music was no longer simply a sequence of notes, but a living story that had grown from the first hesitant chord to a powerful expression of everything she had endured and overcome. Her fingers moved over the keys with confidence and grace, carrying both technical skill and the depth of her emotions. She could feel the energy of the audience, their full attention now captivated by her performance. The skepticism, the whispers, the mockery that had accompanied her to the stage seemed like distant echoes, replaced by awe and admiration. She allowed herself to fully inhabit the music, letting it guide her thoughts and feelings. Each note told a piece of her journey, the long hours of practice, the moments of self-doubt, the criticisms and ridicule she had faced, and the quiet victories she had celebrated alone in her room. The piano had been her companion through it all, a vessel for her emotions and her determination. As she played, she felt a sense of liberation, a release of all the tension and worry that had accompanied her on the way to this moment. The audience felt it too, responding with attention and emotion that matched her own. Her hands moved with both precision and fluidity, each phrase carefully crafted yet full of natural expression. She allowed herself to explore the dynamics, moving from soft, introspective passages to bold, resonant chords that filled the hall. The music carried her story in a language that required no translation, a direct communication from her heart to theirs. She noticed faces in the audience, shifting from quiet curiosity to expressions of surprise, admiration, and wonder. Some leaned forward, trying to catch every detail of her intricate technique, while others closed their eyes, letting the emotions flow through them as she continued. She remembered the long nights she had spent practicing alone, her fingers aching, her eyes tired, and yet her heart full of determination. She recalled the moments when the ridicule of others had made her question her path, the times when she had considered giving up. But she had persisted, driven by a love for the piano and a belief in her own potential. Now, all those moments had found a voice through her music, transforming into a performance that spoke of resilience, courage, and unwavering dedication. The audience was completely immersed in the experience. The young woman could feel the shift in energy, the collective focus and emotion of everyone in the hall. The whispers and doubts that had existed before were gone, replaced by a shared sense of connection. She understood in that moment the true power of music, its ability to transcend words, to communicate directly with the heart, and to create bonds between people who may have never met. The hall was no longer a place of judgment, but a space of shared experience. A testament to her journey and to the universal language of her art, she began to weave subtle variations into the melody, allowing her emotions to guide her choices. The softer passages conveyed vulnerability and introspection, while the more powerful sections spoke of triumph and determination. She let the music breathe, pausing when needed, emphasizing each phrase with intentionality. The audience responded intuitively, some nodding slowly as if understanding her story without needing explanation. Others moved to tears by the raw honesty and passion in her performance. The transformation of their skepticism into admiration was complete,